Mental Health Awareness Month 2025, and Kiana Douglin, co-director of Plenty of Stuff Studio, joins me, Louisa Wizzi Magnussen, founder of Minds Anonymous, now to explore the topic of mental health at work. In recent months, Kiana appeared on my show for Connections Radio, The Business of, and now she's back to share why she feels mental health is an important topic to promote. At work, Kiana draws on years of marketing experience to help businesses grow and launch startups with effective marketing strategies and operations. I wonder, what is Kiana, this high achieving young businesswoman's story? Let's find out. Hello, Kiana, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing okay, thank you very much. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay as well. Okay. It's an important question, isn't it, to just kick us off around mental health. We often ask, how are we? And we always say, yeah, we're fine. But are we really fine? It kind of brings us into the whole topic of mental health awareness, especially in the workplace. So, we're here to put a spotlight really on the power of storytelling and story sharing for mental health. Why do you think it's important to discuss mental health in business?
Yeah, I think it's something, especially mental health, the topic, it's something that is close to my heart as I reached out to you, reached out to a few charities and organizations because I think there's a lot of conversations that don't happen. And if they happened, it could shed more light and awareness on what people are actually going through, especially when in the workplace, in the business world, there's a lot of stigma around that. And again, it's something I'm a huge advocate of trying to play my part in getting rid of these stigmas so people do feel comfortable and confident in speaking up when they're not feeling too well. Because as you said, that question, oh, how are you? The default people go to, especially in the workplace and in business, is, oh, I'm good, thank you. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm okay. When actually there's so much more going on, but they don't feel safe enough to express that.
It's a really interesting point you make, and I completely agree, and how can we promote, I guess it's psychological safety we're talking about, isn't it? How can we promote that in the workplace and make it okay for people to not be okay? What do you think?
I was recently speaking to a business owner himself, and he mentioned that there are policies in place now in his workplace where employees can come in, and the first thing they say is they kind of give a rating. Okay, how are you feeling? 1 to 10, one being not very good, 10 being really good. And based off of that rating for the rest of that day, that's how they will interact with people and how people will interact with them. So, for example, if they come in and they say, I'm feeling number three today, I'm not having a good day, then everybody in the workplace knows, okay, they're not having a great day. And that's almost a cry for help, a call for help. Okay, they're not may not be able to perform to the best of their ability today. So everyone's going to chip in, ask them, what can we take off your plate today? How can we help? And I think that's really important because when you're not having a great day, but you need to be at work, it can just add to that pressure, that burden that you feel. But when you know, okay, you're going into work, there's going to be a team there who are going to support you. You're not going to be looked down upon. Your people aren't going to wonder, why aren't you doing your work? Why aren't you pulling your weight? Because at the end of the day, your health, your mental health, how you're feeling is much more important than any work. And I think as well, what we spoke about was how there's this demand at work to get all of it done, get your list done, get through your list. But actually, when you sit and look at your list, a lot of the things on there aren't that urgent. So it comes down to prioritizing and knowing, okay, no one's going to die if I don't do this. No one's going to, I don't know, lose their job if I don't do this. And so that can be pushed to maybe tomorrow when I'm feeling a bit better. And it's fostering that understanding in that work environment. And that comes from leadership and it kind of feeds all the way down. So if the leaders in the business, CEOs, directors, managers, understand and have that awareness, even if they go and take some courses on mental health or speak to professionals, then that is naturally going to feed down, I guess, down all through the business.
I think that's really important. I think that's really important. And I think that's a really good way of going about this psychological safety in the workplace, having a policy in place, because we all have mental health, don't we? We're not all necessarily mentally ill by definition. We're not necessarily suffering with the sort of big ones, bipolar and manic depression and things like that. But we all have mental health, and it needs to be looked after to keep us well, and perhaps even to stop the sort of more severe diagnoses coming into play. I wonder if more of us understood our mental health from a perspective of mental health is part of being human, it's part of your physical health as well. It's kind of, they go hand in hand, don't they? Do you think if we were more aware of our own mental well-being and our own ups and downs, and were given a space to be more open and honest about it in the workplace, that we could actually do better at work as well?
Yes, 100%. I agree with that because often when you don't understand something, it causes frustration. You think, what's wrong with me? I know I felt that way before when I didn't have any idea about how certain things could affect my mental health. I didn't know too much until I saw certain people close to me going through certain difficulties, struggling, suffering with their mental illness. And then when it started to affect me personally, I started struggling with my mental health as well. And it's not until for me personally, I experienced it or saw it happening that I started to look into it and understand what's really going on. But if you do have that understanding, then you're more likely to know how to deal with it, how to manage the situation. And again, as we've said, when you start having these conversations with people, being open about how you're feeling, they're more likely to show empathy towards you. And it comes from understanding what is going on.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And you partnered with Minds Anonymous, Plenty of Stuff Studio. Your company has partnered with my initiative, Minds Anonymous, this month. Um, Thank you, first of all, for that and the support you've given us. Why did you decide to come on board and help me spread the message of writing as a form of therapy?
So first of all, I love writing myself. That for me is a form of therapy. If I'm having a bad day or there's a lot of thoughts in my head, the first thing I do is I turn to writing. I absolutely love poetry, so that's my outlet. If you like, I'll turn to poetry. I've written a lot of poems. Hopefully, one day I want to publish a poetry book anonymously. Um, but that's first of all. And
Fantastic.
secondly, well, obviously, when the first time that I spoke to you, we kind of had you mentioned Minds Anonymous, and I saw the website anyway when I was doing my research, background research on you, and I just thought it was a really great initiative because when people do speak about how they're feeling anonymously, it takes away that pressure, it takes away that fear that a lot of people do have, and they can just have that same outlet as I have, write about how they're feeling. There's obviously a community within Minds Anonymous where a lot of people they'll submit how they're feeling, and you can go onto that platform, go onto the website, read through the stories, and know you're not alone in your struggles. It's valid the way you're feeling. It doesn't make you less human. You're not alone, and that is such a key part when you are struggling with something, knowing that you're not the only one, that people out there do understand, they care. Hence why there is a platform like Minds Anonymous for people to share that. And it's interesting as well. Why did you start Minds Anonymous? What sparked you?
Well, it was back in 2020. I think we were sort of mid-pandemic, and I'd actually just had ankle surgery, and I was stuck in bed for weeks recovering from this surgery, and I couldn't do anything. I was just in bed, laid up, in a lot of pain and a lot of painkillers. And I had recently done an interview about bipolar for Mental Health Awareness Month. I think it was for May, for a company I used to work for, and they'd interviewed me about bipolar disorder, which is something that I suffer with. And I found the experience of writing about my condition and being interviewed about it really quite therapeutic. But the fear I felt was in that it was being published and it was going to go on LinkedIn. And I was like, no one's ever going to hire me again once they realize I'm not well or have this condition, I'm not going to work again. And that fear kind of incited this idea. I thought, well, how can I promote the idea? Just laid up in bed, in pain. I thought, how can I promote the idea of writing as a form of therapy, but take away the fear that the writer will be stigmatized for it or not get work or anything like that. And it just sort of came to me and make it anonymous. So, and I did a bit of web design anyway for work, and I just had a play, made a logo, came up with a color scheme, and designed a website where people could submit stories anonymously. And all I wanted to do really was help one person feel less alone. And it's really lovely to hear your perspective on Minds Anonymous and hear you talk about how it does make you feel less alone. Because that's exactly what I wanted it to do. And it rapidly gained more and more exposure, more and more views in multiple countries. And I thought, wow, we're onto something here. People started submitting stories. And I think back in 2020, when I first launched it, it had sort of 6,000 views in a couple of months. And I was really excited about that. Obviously, we're up well over 100,000 now, a few years on. And I've dipped in and out of it. Mine's anonymous because of my own mental health as well, because I go up and down with my conditions. I'm not on it, working on it all the time, but whenever I'm well enough to, I work on it and I get the stories in and I edit them and publish them and stuff like that. Um, yeah, so that's really how it started. It was a personal thing for me. I thought I really want to encourage more kind of self-management and self-awareness because it's all, there are governing body, there are platforms available. There are sort of places you can go. You can go to your GP, you can go and find a therapist, you can go and do all these things, but it's quite hard to access it for free because of the how much strain the NHS is under. And I thought, how can we kind of take matters more into our own hands? And I just found personally for me that writing was so therapeutic and a sort of self-soothing exercise. And I wanted to encourage other people to do it. So that's in a sort of longer-winded nutshell. That's the beginning of the story. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a beautiful initiative because from my perspective as well, it's not just about sharing the stories, it's about having that human side of thing, the connection, the empathy, the understanding, as we've spoken about. And that anonymous storytelling is so important, like you said. The issue that I see is you hit the nail on the head that when you spoke about your personal story, you were worried that you were never going to get hired again. And that's the stigma I think that I really wish wasn't there. It unfortunately it is, and there's only you can take kind of small steps to try and rectify that. And I do think in today's day and age, things are getting better. There is more awareness and it's slowly starting to break down that stigma, but there's still a lot of work to be done so that people can comfortably, if they want to, share, okay, I'm dealing with this, I've been diagnosed with this mental illness, and not worry about it affecting their secular work, their career, their employment status, because people shouldn't be defined by what illnesses they have.
Absolutely.
It,
Mm.
it's that's wrong.
It's not a
And
defining term, is it? I mean, I don't walk into a room and say, "Hello, I'm Louisa Wizzi Magnussen. I have bipolar." It's not
exactly,
an identifying thing, is it? It's a thing we have to deal with, and it's a amongst the conditions. These are part. It's mental health is part of being human. That's the message
yeah,
we try and get across. It's something we all have to manage, and our partner Jill Jardine is a counselor psychotherapist, and she talks about a sort of triangle of life, and you've got your work, you've got your relationships, and your home life. And if all three are going tickety boo, you're probably going to be well.
yeah, yeah,
It's a bit, less likely you'll suffer with a mental illness if everything's going well. But as you and I know, it's rare that all three are in sync at the same time. And as soon as one goes out of kilter, you might suffer a little bit with your mental health. And then if two go out of kilter, a bit more. And then if three go out of kilter, the way she puts it is that it's very difficult to maintain good mental health if all those areas of life are not working well. So there's a sort of balance between having an illness and also our lifestyle and our what's going on for us in the world. And things can be triggering. Trauma can trigger a mental health reaction and make us less well. Um, Tell me more about your mental health story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So,
Mhm.
as I've said, let's go pre-lockdown, pre-COVID. I had never really felt like, because again, I wouldn't have known, I didn't have that awareness. I'd never felt like I had struggled with my mental health. It's always been what I would say quite stable. It had never been anything that I'd been worried about or even aware of. Maybe that was what was going on there. I wasn't aware. But then it was halfway through lockdown, a close family member of mine started to really struggle, and that opened up. I mean, it turned my world upside down. It just opened up a whole new, I'm gonna say, world for me that I'd never seen.
Hadn't
Because
been on
when
your radar before, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was challenging for me to watch someone I love so much go through something that I didn't understand. I didn't know how to help. We were in lockdown. There's not too much, you call for help. And at the time, I I felt like there wasn't anywhere to turn. I mean, you'd speak to the mental health professionals, and because it was obviously a difficult time during COVID and lockdown and can't be socializing and together, I just felt very stuck. And I think because of everything that was going on, it started to weigh me down to the point where I struggled with my mental health significantly. But I didn't speak up about it because I felt as if I spoke up, it's another person kind of in the family that's struggling, and I didn't want to be a burden. So I silently struggled, but that only lasts so long until it's like I hit a breaking point, and I was spoken to by a psychiatrist. Said, look, you need to go and seek help for your mental health. And thankfully, I had that nudge, because had I not had that, I probably would have just tried to soldier on. I hate that phrase in this context.
Mhm.
But that's where it all began. And then I started to do a lot more research to try and understand my family member's condition and what was happening with my mental health, why. And I started to do some online therapy. So the way I did that is I went through the NHS. But as you said, and conversations I've had as well, I had to wait about 6 weeks.
Mm.
They put me on a waiting list, and I just waited because I didn't know what else to do. This is the first time I'm having to do this for myself. I thought I just had to wait. And then it got to a point where I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. So I called. I said, look, I do need help now. And thankfully, they did fast track my, let's say, application for help. But that was because I explained my situation that I was already in. And so that highlighted to me an issue. When people need help, they need it now, not in 6 weeks' time, not in 2 months, 3 months' time. They need it now. So that was the first time where I thought there's a bit of a gap here. But
Mm.
I as well wasn't aware at that point that there are charities and organizations who do offer free help. They make a promise that you'll get a phone call within 24, 48 hours, and you will be matched to a mental health professional within that week. I didn't know that was even an option. I thought I had to have loads of money at the time. Wasn't able to, um, I didn't have the resources to go and pay for some help. So I started therapy. It was something that I'd never considered. Uh, it was CBT therapy, and we were focusing on how to manage my emotions around the situation that was going on. The first time, it didn't work for me. However, the second time I thought, you know what? This was about 6 months on now. I'm going to try it again because I've read all these stories about how therapy had helped people. And I thought, I'm not just going to write it off because I didn't think it worked. Second time, it was exactly what I needed. And I received the help that I needed. It was like a huge weight burden had been lifted off my shoulders. I learn how to cope with what was going on. And then from that point onwards, I was in and out of therapy sessions for about 2 years. And that helped me dramatically. That's just in a nutshell what happened back then. And then
Mm,
obviously we come out of lockdown and COVID and fast forward to kind of now, or I say about a year ago, I actually I started to struggle again with my mental health. I think, like you said, the triangle that you mentioned, if your
mm.
families, your relationships or family isn't going well, and this isn't going well, your social life isn't going well, it all begins to, I guess, feel like the whole world is collapsing. So things weren't going too well for me at that point. And for me, environment is extremely important, and this is just a personal decision I made. I decided I didn't want to live in the UK anymore. The pressure, the expectation, the high cost of living for me, it wasn't worth risking my mental health and my peace and my sanity. So I moved to Mauritius, and that kind of stabilized me because it was a completely different environment. Work wasn't everything. There's less pressure. For me, I was surrounded by less expectation because family members and friends weren't there. Sorry, guys, it's just the truth. Um, and so I began to enjoy life again without that pressure. And then fast forward to now, um, almost a year into Plenty of Stuff Studio, this business. I have struggled on and off recently, quite very badly, actually. I think the pressure of being a business owner and having a lot of what I feel eyes on you, and deadlines, and clients are chasing you up, and you have overheads to pay, you have bills to pay, you've got this to do, a million things to do, and the list just gets longer and longer and longer. And that's something new that I'm trying to manage at the moment, uh, hand in hand with trying to set up another business as well. So you'll probably know it's a lot to deal with. And I did read somewhere that, I'm not going to quote the stat because I can't remember it, to be perfectly honest with you, but a very high percentage of business owners will struggle quite badly with their mental health because of,
It's a lot of stress, isn't it? It's a lot
yeah.
of pressure, and I feel it myself. I've worked for myself through most of my career, and that's partly to protect myself from when I'm not well. I mean, the beauty of running your own business is you can schedule your own, you can plan your own schedule. You haven't got people looking over your shoulder and managing you. I'm not very good at being managed. I have to manage myself. And one thing that I remember an employer said to me many years ago is the problem with you, Wizzy, is you're not consistent. And I said, no, I know. And that's because some days I wake up and it's just a no. I can't work. And that's because of my mental health issues. And that's why I elect to work for myself most of the time. I haven't had many corporate roles throughout my career. Because I prefer running the show, and I prefer having, and I find it helpful for my mental health, but it's also detrimental to my mental health because the responsibility is all on me. If I don't work, I don't get paid. There's no sick leave, there's no holiday pay, there's nothing like that. And that's something but I wonder also if there's a connection between those that might suffer with mental health issues and being entrepreneurial and being wanting to be our own bosses. I just wonder if there's a correlation. I wonder how many business owners do suffer with their
Mm.
mental health, and if that's the case as well, why are not more businesses starting up these policies that you mentioned earlier of coming into work and saying I'm a 3 today and having the pressure taken off you. You'd think if business owners were more likely to suffer with mental illness, that more businesses would already have this policy in place to help employees because they'd need it themselves.
Yeah, I think so. I have wondered that as well. And that's something that for the studio, our studio, it's something that we would like to implement. At the moment, it's just myself and Tim kind of full time every day. We obviously have a team, a wider team, but it's something that for us, I want to get right. For other businesses, I obviously can't speak for companies, but I think again, it does come down to a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding, not not really knowing what's going on. And as I think as someone, a decision maker in the business, there's a million other things to do. So then to think about making a policy, it probably drops down to near the bottom of the list. But actually, this
Mm.
is something that needs to be pushed up because everyone likes to speak about culture in their workplace and this and that. If for, I'm just gonna, I'll keep it real here. I think a lot of that is nonsense. I think a lot of the businesses who speak about,
Kickboxing.
yeah,
Mm.
workplace culture, if you go and speak to their employees, they're stressed, they're underpaid, they're overworked. There is no culture, and if there is, it's a bad one. And I think businesses should be a lot more serious about the environment their employees are working in, and realize that actually the key to their business success is their employees and people they work with being happy, feeling respected, feeling valued, and that is going to boost their mental health. What schemes are in place? If someone's not feeling well, why do they have to phone in and say, I'm having a bad mental health day? Just why can't they just take the day off? It's
Mm.
things like that, because then having to explain yourself, and it's very small things, but it's things like that that we'd like to implement in our policies moving forward so that there's not this stigma attached, and that actually it's as an employer, I would like to know how you're feeling so that we can help. But I also understand that in order to get to the place where an employee can come to me and say, I'm struggling, I need to show that I'm not going to look down on them. I'm not going to be mad or angry that they can't work or fulfill their job role. It's a human to human approach that I want here, not someone in a leadership position and an employee, because everyone's equal. It doesn't matter. And I just think there should be more done in the workplace to
Mm.
promote that.
There's also, I mean, there's got to be a balance, hasn't there? You can't have, as a business owner, as an employer, you can see that you couldn't survive in your business if your employees are taking mental health days every day,
Yeah,
or
cool.
3 times a week for 3 months. It must get to a point where you have to say to this individual, if you're not well enough to work, we perhaps need to drop your hours, or we perhaps need to reduce your tasks, or and really, I guess it's working with the individual, because we're not us that have mental health conditions are no less valuable to the workplace. I really believe that we have a lot to offer. Often people with psychiatric disorders are highly creative or highly logical. It's the same with people on the neurodiversity spectrum. They can often be incredibly talented individuals. All they need is a bit of understanding in the workplace and a bit of modification to the workplace. Bright lights and noise and hectic offices are not, I mean, not many people like that anyway, do they? Never mind if you've got a psychiatric disorder or a neurodiverse condition, or label. I hate labels, but if you are a person who struggles with things like overstimulation and things like that, it doesn't actually take a lot to reduce that. And maybe, but then I can also see that it's difficult to be individual about this all the time, because you want it to be fair for everybody, and it can't take up all of a business's time, can it? Mental health awareness and making
Yeah.
sure people feel psychologically safe, but it's a balance, don't you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance. And to be perfectly honest, not all organizations and businesses can afford to implement certain policies because maybe they're not big enough yet. Maybe it's not, like I said, their priority or focus yet. But I think it's something that should be on the radar. And yeah, there's got to be the balance both ways, doesn't there? If as
Mm.
you said, the employees are just taking mental health days every day, well, that's not going to be in the business's best
It's not
interest.
sustainable, is it? It's not sustainable for the
Exactly.
business. It's not sustainable or fair on the individual either. Sometimes people can be too poorly to work. But that's also not a thing to be ashamed of. Take some time off, take a month off. And perhaps if an employer can be reasonable about that as well and say, okay, well, you're not coping. We need to be honest here. We just need to be open and honest and not afraid and not ashamed, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's always going to be difficult to strike that balance. I'll be honest with you, because you also need to, as I said, build that relationship with your employees. And a lot of the time, like, who really wants to be friends with? I mean, you don't have to be friends. Who wants to be friends with the person who's employed them? Or that's just the reality. But yeah, there are things that can be done, and it starts with getting to know your employees and creating an environment where they can feel supported and feel looked after and cared about. That's where it starts.
So, Kiana, we've talked about mental health in the workplace, how perhaps workplaces can better support people with their mental health on a sort of day-to-day basis with stand-up meetings and things like this and scales of 1 to 10. But what would you say to young people who are perhaps looking at their careers, their options, and how to get into the workplace? What would you say to anybody watching this that maybe a bit concerned about what career to take on, about how they can self-manage their own health outside of the workplace and prepare themselves better for the workplace?
Okay. I think people should definitely sit down and think about and list the type of place they want to work in. Now, if you're someone who thrives in a fast-paced environment and you can handle the pressures and all of that, and that really motivates you, then that's absolutely brilliant. Write that down and and look for a place that kind of meets your requirements if you must. However, if you're someone who wants a more slower pace of work and you don't like going into the office and you'd rather work from home fully remote or majority of the time, then look for roles like that. But also write down your boundaries. That's very
Mm.
important, I think. You need to know when to say no, when to walk away from a situation, because you could have on paper, you might be getting interviewed for your dream job and oh my goodness, it's everything you wanted. It's that role, you've been studying for that for X amount of years and it's you've always dreamed about doing that and it's going to give you the life that you want. But if you go into that and they say to you, okay, you're you have to be in the office and you're someone who can't cope in the office environment or it's somewhere you struggle, you get overstimulated, then I don't think it's worth compromising on your boundary because that will eventually lead to you being unhappy because you've compromised that boundary. Stay true to yourself, stay true to what you want. There are jobs out there are employers out there who are going to respect your boundaries and just believe in yourself. Self-belief is everything.
I think that's really important. You talk about boundaries and self-belief and self-awareness. It's also about knowing ourselves, isn't it? And what those limits are, what those boundaries are. Because I think when we're young, we're sort of taught that the world is our oyster and you can do anything you want. But there are limitations. We have limitations within ourselves, and that's also okay. I think a big theme about this conversation we're having today is to let people out there know that it is okay to have boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to walk away from something you thought was going to be the dream career that perhaps just doesn't suit you. That's okay too. There's a place in this world for all of us, don't you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the often we're taught that, don't quit, keep going, just soldier on. I don't believe in
There's
that
that
at
phrase
all.
soldier on again. Yeah, we don't like
Yeah,
that, do we? We need more
I don't like
gentleness, I think.
it.
more
Yeah,
gentleness with ourselves and with other people, more empathy, more compassion,
yeah,
and just
exactly.
to know that, if people are struggling, I think it's okay. We all struggle. We're only human, and that's a big part of what Minds Anonymous message is all about. And we share articles from mental health professionals as well to try and support people with their mental health. And yeah, just self-soothing, self-management. We are responsible for our own lives. I think that's another point that we perhaps need to explore. How much help can we be seeking and how much do we need to help ourselves? A lot of the articles we put out on Minds Anonymous, the support articles are about self-management and are about what we can do day to day to keep ourselves safe, well, and ticking along, keep ourselves in a good headspace and knowing when it's time to call in the experts and call in extra help is also important. How did you know personally? I hope you don't mind me asking another personal question, but how did you know you needed help? When was that point for you?
It was around the time I realized I was going to lose my grandmother. So I was very close to her. And I remember it so vividly. I was staying at her in her apartment while she wasn't there. She was in hospital. I was on my own. It was the first time I'd had my own space away from what was going on at my own home and with another family member. And I just sat on the floor with my head in my hands and I just thought, I can't do this. And it was that moment where it was almost like I can't do it anymore. I need help. And if I don't get the help now, I don't know what's going to happen. I couldn't see beyond. That
Yeah.
was the point for me. And I'd never been in that space. Even, everyone's experienced hardships. They've experienced hard times in their lives, losing someone they love or, grief that comes along with it, certain traumas in their life. But I, I'd seem to I'd seem to be okay getting through that. It was difficult, but this one was different. And that's exactly how I knew.
Wow. So it was the difference when you just knew there was no way out, essentially.
Yeah.
I think it shows incredible strength that you were able to know that you needed help. And I think that's important. That's important. Yeah.
Yeah, it is important. I think because a lot of the time, I'm the type of person naturally, it's not really a good thing, where I'm actually, I'll take it, well, I'll make it more broader. When you're looked at or viewed as the strong one, in a family, in a friendship group, a social group, wherever at work, you're almost like the emotional support pillar for everybody around you. Quite often in my experience and from what I've seen, those who are considered the strongest get less help because people rely on them. They're putting their
Yeah.
baggage on
And
them.
people think you're
But
fine.
eventually,
They think you can cope, that you're
exactly.
resilient, you've shown
Yeah,
your strength, you're a strong person. It's
exactly.
also harder for those people to reach out as well, I think, when you are known as the
Yes.
strong one, the pillar. It's hard to
Yeah,
say, actually, I'm not feeling strong. And that also goes back to boundaries as well, boundaries in relationships. Because sometimes friends can come to you for help, and sometimes you might have to say, I'm sorry, I'm not the person for you right now. I need to be there for myself right now. How difficult is that?
that's so difficult, especially when you want to be there to help. Something that with some of my friends that we've kind of implemented as you like is if we're about to, I don't know what to do, like trauma dump or call the other one and say, this is going on, we'll call and say, do you have capacity to hear
Yeah.
what I'm about to say? And it's either yes or no. And if it's well, actually, no, I don't, there's no funny feelings. There's no hard feelings. It's okay. We understand you're not at the best place either. Let me try and deal with that. We'll still be there for each other, but just don't have the capacity to support in the way that you need me to support. And I think that open communication as well saves a lot of issues or thinking, oh, maybe they don't care or are they actually there for me? Because then you just know.
I think there's a story on Minds Anonymous to that exact effect, actually. It says it's why
Really?
it's, I think it's called Why It's Okay You Weren't There. And it's the
Oh,
story
I'll
somebody,
have to have a look.
yeah, it's the story somebody submitted about a time they reached out to a friend and this friend couldn't help, couldn't be there, were not emotionally available. And this person explores in this story, explores the effect it had on them and how they initially were very upset and almost angry. You know, how I thought you were my friend, I thought, but then in hindsight, when they reviewed the situation, reviewed what had happened, they realized actually, no, that it wasn't. They weren't there, not out of choice. They were not there because they couldn't be there. And I forgive you for that. That's okay because we all
Yeah.
have our capacity and it's even the strong ones, you know, and I've experienced that as well. I can kind of relate to what you say about being the strong one. I've always been this bubbly extroverted personality and everybody thinks it's just a force of energy and happiness and
Yeah.
but deep down I
All the
might be
time.
in pieces, you know, and it's very hard to say to take the mask off and say no, I'm not that strong person you thought I was today, right now. It doesn't mean you're not forever, because I think the other thing about mental health and mental illness is even if we have conditions, we're not ill all the time. And that's very
No.
important when it comes to talking about work and careers and mental health in the workplace as well. You know, for me personally, sometimes I'm too ill to work, but most of the
Mm.
time I'm not. Most of the time I'm quite sort of normal. Well, I wouldn't
Mm.
say normal, but who is?
Yeah.
Nobody's normal, are they? There is no normal.
Yeah.
Um, but you know what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say? You know, it's not like if you have a condition, as we said earlier, it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you're less capable than the next person. It doesn't mean you can't go to work. It just means you might
Yeah.
have to adjust your life and your career perspectives and perhaps your dreams and what you want out of life and out of a career.
Mhm.
You might have to adjust it to keep yourself well because health has to come first, doesn't it? If we're not
Yeah.
well, we're no good to anybody. And we like being good for other people. I think it's good for the soul to be able to be there for other people and to do things for other people. And we can't do that if we're struggling ourselves. So, health first, don't you think?
Always, I think that's it's funny because when things are going well, you know, your health's good, you have a million things on your list, you know, you can do this, you can do that, you do that. But when your health isn't good, the only thing for me that's on my list is okay, I need to get better.
Yeah.
Physical, mental, whatever, because nothing else matters. If you're not
Yeah.
well, you can't do anything else, you know, you can't almost get on with life because you now need to get better. And I want to ask you a personal question as well.
Go for it.
Um, when you spoke out about having bipolar, did you notice any shift in how people were treating you at all?
It's a few years ago now. I'm trying to think. I mean, to be honest, that job that I was in, that I did the article for, ended in a bit of a disaster. Because yes, they did treat me
Yeah.
differently once it all came out. Um, I'll be totally honest and open about this. It can be used against you
Hmm. Hmm.
and your behaviors. If something goes wrong at work, people can say, no, that's your brain remembering or misevaluating the situation. It's not that this particular client's being difficult, you're the problem.
Wow.
And your
Yeah.
illness is the problem. And I had that kind of thrown in my face. And that did lead to regrets about talking about it publicly. But then I had
Mm.
to kind of battle with myself over that. And I thought, well, it's out there now. I can't exactly take it back. And that just
Yeah.
all it did though was drive more of a passion in me to end this stigma and to be more
Yes.
open and more honest and say, no, I'm gonna bloomin' well defeat this stigma and I'm not gonna let it affect my work. I'm gonna carry on as I am. I'm gonna go run my own business. I'm gonna be a broadcast journalist. I'm gonna be a website designer. I'm gonna run this initiative and I'm gonna beat this for
Yes.
myself and also then I'm gonna publish about that and beat it for other people as well. And we just have to keep it's a battle. It is a battle, but we have to battle the old way of thinking and the lack of understanding around mental health and mental illness. And the way we do that is by having conversations like this, open table conversations where we talk about the nitty gritty of what we're talking about. You know, does that answer
Yeah.
your question?
It does, and good for you. I'm so glad that you. I mean, as you said, it's a battle, but I'm glad that you're staying true to yourself and you're saying, no, do you know what? This doesn't define me. I'm gonna go and do this irrespective, and not allowing it to become a barrier, breaking down that barrier. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we've got a lot of barriers to break, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there are so much. I think as well, a lot of, the reason why I'm so heavy and big on advocating, it actually, again, being honest, comes from a lot of anger. A lot of anger
Yeah.
that when, why did I feel like there wasn't enough help? Why did I have to watch someone I love go through something and then be told there is help out there? Go to this person, I go to them and there's no help. Why? Why is there no one to turn to? I mean, now you've got mental health crisis lines that you can call, and they say, you can go down to A&E, even in a mental health crisis or an emergency. But at the time, I'm talking 2021, that there wasn't that, or from my
Yeah.
experience, who I tried to contact, there wasn't that, and
It's
it
quite
just
it's quite
everything.
new, all these crisis lines. And I
Yeah.
find, because I obviously have the crisis lines, I have never
Mm,
called a crisis line, even when I've been in crisis, because I don't want to take up the space on the phone that somebody that really needs it. Now, this is daft because I really need it sometimes,
yes.
and I need
Yeah.
to get over that fear of you using these services. I think we all do. They are there to be called, and you're not less important than the next person with a mental health condition or the next person that's having a panic. You are just as important. It's something I need to learn in myself and tell myself, really. So I'm telling you this and telling perhaps the listeners and watchers of this video, use those lines, but really I'm talking to myself. So, Kiana, I think we need to wrap this up for today. It's been amazing to talk to you about all of this, and thank you for sharing some of your personal experiences. I think it's going to be really useful for people to hear from you as a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a young one at that. I'd love to ask you how old you are, but I know that's not very polite, so I won't.
I'll
But I
tell you
think
after.
but I think you're a superstar. And thank you for this. I have one more question for you. Do you think there's a downside to mental health awareness?
Oh, I do I think there's a downside? Actually, I'm going to say yes. I think people may, there's always going to be, not always, maybe that's a bit of a negative mindset. There's there's going to be people who may try and use this or things that we've brought awareness to their advantage, and perhaps they're not struggling. They know they're not struggling. They're just using it to maybe not work. They're using it to, I
Get some
don't know,
benefits money.
yeah, make
Mm,
money from monetizing. They're using it as almost like PR stunts. I think that's the downside.
yeah.
Just not having the right motives and intentions. But in terms of the actual awareness, I think when it's used in the right way, good motives, good intentions, there can't be any harm from it. But
I think we can agree that the pros outweigh the cons, right? But I agree with you, and I say pros and cons sort of purposefully because there are some con people out
yeah,
there who will use this and will use mental health as excuses and as ways to wheedle their way out of being decent human beings. But there's more good people than bad, right? I
yeah,
think. Um,
I agree.
and I
Yes.
think overall it's important to raise mental health awareness and get the message out there. So Kiana, I'm gonna say goodbye and thank you for talking to me today. Um yeah, do you have anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Just to end, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Mental illness does not define who you are. Everyone's a human, and it's okay not to be okay. And thank you so much for having me here and speaking about this important topic.
Thank you, Kiana, and thank you to you as well for the questions and insights. And yeah, I'll catch you soon.